The flashlight beam, weak and yellow, cut a wobbling circle in the airborne dust. It landed on Arthur's hand. His hand, gnarled by 73 years of work and weather, was shaking so hard the things inside it rattled with a sound like broken teeth. They weren't bright, they weren't sparkling. They were dull, greasy-looking, sharp-edged pebbles of gray and yellowed glass. Aquarium gravel. That was the thought that slammed into him, a physical blow. He'd just blown $340, their entire emergency fund, the money meant for Ellie's heart medication, the cash he'd saved from his meager pension checks for 8 solid months, on a dead millionaire's aquarium gravel. He'd felt the click of the lock, the rumble of the corrugated door, the sudden electric thrill of the win. He'd beaten the ringers, the professionals who always outbid him. For once, he'd won. Now, standing in the cold, concrete tomb that smelled of rust and something like old, dead paper, all he felt was the acid of failure burning in his throat. This wasn't just a mistake, it was a betrayal. It was the same stupid hope that made him buy scratch-off tickets at the gas station, a hope he despised in himself. The unit was almost empty. A few tall, sealed metal cabinets stood against the back wall like sentinels, and this one small, impossibly heavy rosewood box. Ellie, her breath coming in shallow, papery sighs, leaned against the doorframe. She wouldn't come further in. The dust, she'd said. But Arthur knew. She was afraid of the dark, afraid of this. She had her hand over the thin fabric of her coat, pressed against her chest, as if she could physically hold her own weak heart together. "Arthur?" she whispered. Her voice was thin, but it cut through the silence. "What is it? What did we buy?" Arthur couldn't speak. He just stared at the greasy stones. Stupid, old, fool. The words looped in his head. He'd be telling her he'd made a mistake, again. That her pills would have to wait, again. Then his thumb, rough as sandpaper, rubbed against the grime on one of the larger ones. He was trying to wipe away the failure, but the stone, it wasn't glass. Glass would be light. This was heavy. His thumb squeaked on the surface, and beneath the film, it wasn't a sparkle. It was a cold, internal fire, a depth that seemed to pull the weak light from his flashlight and swallow it whole. It was a dead light, not a living sparkle, and it frightened him more than the gravel had. He looked at the bottom of the velvet bag. There, folded into a small, tight square, was a piece of heavy, cream-colored paper. An invoice? A receipt? He fumbled with it, his fingers thick and clumsy with cold. He dropped 2 of the stones. They didn't scatter. They didn't tink. They thudded on the concrete floor, a sound of impossible density. Ellie, sensing the shift in the air, pushed herself off the wall. "Arthur, you're scaring me." She came forward, her shoes scuffing on the gritty floor, and knelt to pick up the note. He was still on his knees, staring at the 2 stones that had fallen. Ellie unfolded the paper. Her fingers, twisted with the same arthritis that plagued his, traced the sharp, angry black ink. The handwriting was all peaks and valleys, like a mountain range, like a heartbeat in its final, furious spikes. She read it aloud, her voice trembling, not with cold, but with a new, sharp fear that filled the concrete box. For Anna, the real ones, the ones from the earth, before the cutting. Your inheritance is not what you wear, but what you built. Ellie looked up, her face a pale, terrified mask in the flashlight's glow. "Anna, Arthur, I'm not Anna." Arthur looked from the note to his wife's pale face and back to the pile of rocks in his hand that suddenly felt like they were burning through his skin. "Ellie," he said, his own voice a stranger, a dry rasp. "I think we're in terrible trouble."
"Wait! Before you see what's inside?"
If this story already has your heart pounding, tell us where you're watching from. When forgotten boxes open, when second chances hide under dust and debt, subscribe and stay close. You'll never guess what's been left behind. Now, back to the lock clicking open. The silence that followed Ellie's words was heavier and colder than the concrete walls. It was the silence of two people who had spent 50 years navigating the shallow, rocky waters of just enough and had just fallen off a cliff into an ocean of too much. Arthur's first instinct was to close his hand, to hide the stones, as if the dark itself had eyes, as if the auctioneer, the other bidders, the entire world was pressing in on this little metal room. As if the dead millionaire, Thomas Kincaid, was still standing in the corner. The auctioneer had made a show of the unit. Unit 14B belonged to the recluse Thomas Kincaid, the mining tycoon. His family wants it gone. They haven't even looked inside. Could be gold, could be garbage. It was, apparently, both, and it was poison. "Put them back, Arthur," Ellie breathed. Her voice was thin, reedy. She was asthmatic, and the dust was getting to her. But this was different. This was the asthma of the soul. "Put them back and lock the door. We can just leave it. We can pretend we—" "Pretend what, Elle?" Arthur's voice was sharp. "We're out $340, your medicine money. We can't pretend that." "It's better than this," she hissed, gesturing at the box. "Ellie, I don't," Arthur stammered. He tried to pour the stones back into the velvet bag, but his hands were shaking too violently. 3 more pebbles of impossible weight clicked onto the floor. He dropped to his knees, his arthritic joints screaming in protest. He wasn't a man who knelt easily, not for God, not for anyone. But here he was, on his knees on a filthy floor, scrambling for a dead man's sins. He fumbled, picking them up, the grime from the concrete sticking to the greasy, precious surfaces. "We can't, Arthur, we can't," Ellie was pleading, as if he'd suggested they rob a bank. It's not ours, not really. The note, for Anna. We're not Anna." "We bought the unit, Elle." Arthur's voice was rough. He got to his feet, a small grunt of pain escaping him. He shoved the velvet bag back into the rosewood box and snapped the lid shut. The sound was as final as a gavel, as the crack of a judge's hammer. "We paid the money. The auctioneer said sold. It's ours." "It feels wrong." Her voice was a small, wounded thing. "What feels wrong," Arthur said, his voice rising with a sudden, desperate anger, "is that past due notice from the electric company sitting on our table. What feels wrong is you cutting your heart pills in half, hoping they'll last the week. What feels wrong is me, at 73, not being able to buy my wife a decent coat for a winter that's half over." He grabbed the box. It was heavy, heavier than it had a right to be, heavy with stone, with wood, with inheritance. He grunted and tucked it under his arm, holding it tight against his ribs. "What about the cabinets?" Ellie asked, her flashlight beam dancing over the tall metal lockers. They looked sterile, military grade, told. "They can wait," Arthur said. "I'm not leaving this here." He felt like a thief. He, Arthur Miller, who had returned a wallet with $200 in it just last year to a man who didn't even say thank you. He, who had never cheated on his taxes, not even by $1, even when the accountant said everyone did. He felt the burning shame of a criminal, and all he'd done was win an auction. They didn't speak on the drive home. Their 1998 Buick, with its rattling muffler and a permanent scent of damp wool, sat on Ellie's lap. She didn't touch it. She just rested her hands on either side of it, as if to keep it from exploding, as if she were a bomb squad tech and not a retired librarian. What if we're being watched? Ellie whispered, her face pale in the passing streetlights. Who would be watching, Elle? Arthur said, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. We're just old, in an old car. They watch people like us, she said, her voice flat. The ones who get lucky. They know before we do. He had no answer for that. Their home was a small post-war bungalow in a neighborhood that was slowly losing its fight with time. Peeling paint, a patchy lawn, a fence that leaned at a weary angle. It was clean. Ellie kept it spotless, but it was tired. It was a house that knew it was losing. Arthur placed the box on the kitchen table. It was a Formica table, a yellow and white boomerang pattern from 1960. He'd installed it himself back when his hands were steady. On that table, the rosewood box with its polished brass hinges looked like royalty visiting the slums. It made the whole kitchen look shabbier, poorer. The past due notice for the mortgage was propped against the salt shaker, red ink, final notice. Arthur picked it up. He felt the flimsy, cheap paper. He felt the weight of the box. The two things didn't belong in the same universe, and yet here they were. On his table. Arthur sat. Ellie stood by the sink, her back to him, her knuckles white on the porcelain edge. "Make some tea, Elle?" he asked. "I don't want tea." Her voice was flat. "Ellie, look at me." She turned. Her eyes were red. "You want to sell them?" It wasn't a question. "We have to," he said, his voice low. "We have to see. What if it's just costume jewelry? What if it's a rich man's elaborate, cruel joke? And what if it's not, Arthur?" She shot back, her voice suddenly fierce. "What if that's a box of blood diamonds? That man, Kincaid." "The mining tycoon? Where do you think he got them? Do you think he dug them up himself in his backyard in the Hamptons?" Arthur had no answer. The silence stretched again, filled only by the hum of the old refrigerator, a hum that seemed to get louder every month. He reached out and touched the box. The wood was smooth, warm, alive. "One," he said. We find out about one." Ellie closed her eyes. "Who, Arthur? Who do we take this to? Mr. Henderson's pawn shop? Between the fishing rods and the broken guitars? He'll either laugh in our faces or he'll call the police. Or worse." "Worse?" "Worse," she said, her voice dropping. "Worse is that he won't call the police. Remember when Henderson's got robbed 2 years ago? They didn't take the TVs, Art. They didn't take the rifles. They broke open the floor safe and took the little box he kept under the counter, the one with the private sales. He never opened his shop again. He just moved to Florida. People who deal in things like this, they aren't men like you, Art. They aren't." He knew she was right. The weight of the problem was suffocating. They were two mice who had found a brick of gold, and now they had to figure out how to eat it without being crushed. "The note," Ellie said, walking slowly to the table. She'd tucked it into her coat pocket. She laid it out, smoothing the crease. "For Anna. Your inheritance is not what you wear, but what you built." She looked up, her eyes clear. "This isn't money, Arthur. This is a message." "It's a box of rocks, Ellie." "No, it's a test," she said, her voice firm. "It's a test, and I think we're failing." "God doesn't test people with rocks, Ellie," Arthur retorted, his patience snapping. "The devil maybe, but not God." Arthur sighed, the anger draining out of him, leaving only the familiar bone weariness. He got up, his knees cracking, and went to the den, a small, cramped room off the kitchen that smelled of old books and dust. He booted up their ancient desktop computer. It whirred, it clicked, the fan sounding like a small, dying animal. The high-speed internet they paid for was barely faster than the dial-up they'd replaced. He typed, "Thomas Kincaid." The man's face filled the screen. Hard eyes, a hawk nose, a grim line for a mouth. He died 8 months ago. Heart attack. Age 79. A brilliant, ruthless, and deeply private man, the Forbes obituary read. Kincaid built his empire, Kincaid Global, from a single disputed claim in Botswana in the 1970s. His methods were often controversial, but his results were undeniable. A titan of industry who saw borders as mere suggestions. Ruthless, Arthur said, loud enough for Ellie to hear. She came to stand in the doorway, wringing her hands in the dish towel. The article mentioned his family. He is survived by a son, Thomas Kincaid Jr., who has run the global conglomerate since 2010, and a daughter, Annalisa Kincaid Sharma, from whom he was reportedly estranged. Arthur's fingers felt thick on the keyboard. He typed in Thomas Kincaid Jr. first. The screen filled with images of a man in a perfect suit, standing in front of glass and steel buildings. A man who looked just like his father, but polished, colder. The Kincaid Global website was all about sustainable futures and ethical sourcing, words that felt hollow and false. For a moment, Arthur thought this was Anna, an abbreviation. But the obituary said Annalisa. He went back. He typed Annalisa Kincaid Sharma. He found her. It wasn't hard. She wasn't hiding. She had a small, public website. Not for a company, but for a school. The Foundry, a community art and trade space. Detroit, MI. There was a picture of her, paint smeared on her cheek, a wide, tired smile. She was surrounded by teenagers, all of them holding up sculptures made of scrap metal. And on the About page, there was a needs list. Welding masks, 5, used okay. Plywood for new stage. Clay, any kind. And at the bottom, a new roof. We can dream, right? Detroit, Arthur said softly. She's a teacher, in Detroit. Ellie leaned on the doorframe, her hand at her chest. Oh, Arthur, oh no. It was worse. It was so much worse. The diamonds weren't meant for the millionaire son who was already running the company. They were meant for a school teacher in a rough part of Detroit who needed a roof. What you built, Ellie whispered, her eyes filling with tears. He wasn't talking about the diamonds. He was talking about that, her school. Arthur clicked back to the storage unit's auction page. Unit 14B. All items sold as is, where is. No guarantees, no refunds, all sales final. Contents are the legal property of the winning bidder. He read it aloud, his voice flat. That's a legal document, Art, Ellie said. That's not a moral one. It's ours, Elle. Legally. We bought it. We won. It doesn't feel like winning, she said. The phone rang, making them both jump. It was the pharmacy. Ellie's prescription was ready. The copay was $430 for 1 month. Arthur looked at the past due notice on the kitchen table. He looked at the rosewood box. He looked at his wife, who looked 20 years older than she had this morning. I'm going back, he said. What? To the unit, the cabinets. The note said inheritance. Maybe the rest of it is in there. Maybe a will, something that tells us what to do. Or maybe, Ellie said, her voice hollow, it's just more diamonds. Arthur grabbed his keys. I have to know. We can't sit here. We have to know. This time, he went alone. Ellie said she couldn't. She said she needed to make peace with the house. He knew what that meant. It's what she did when her mother died. It's what she did when he lost his pension. It meant she was going to scrub the floors, to put her small, ordered world back together, bracing for the impact of the world outside. The used storage facility was quiet. The sun was setting, casting long orange shadows. His keycard swiped. The gate beeped. He drove the Buick to Unit 14B, feeling like a man returning to the scene of a crime. He felt angry. The $340 win had felt good for an hour. Now it just felt like a trap. He rolled up the door. The smell of dust and concrete and old paper hit him. He'd brought a better flashlight. He went straight to the tall metal cabinets. They were sealed with a simple hasp and a padlock. He'd brought his bolt cutters. The sound of the lock snapping was obscenely loud in the twilight. It banged and echoed, and his heart leaped into his throat. He waited, listening for alarms, for footsteps. Nothing, just the distant hum of the freeway. He pulled the metal door open. It screeched in protest. It wasn't more diamonds. It wasn't gold. It was journals. Dozens of them. Identical, leather-bound black moleskine notebooks. They were stacked perfectly, filling the cabinet from top to bottom. Each one was labeled on the spine with a gold-embossed stamp. Botswana, 1978. Sierra Leone, 1984. Angola, 1991. Kalahari, 1999. Arthur's blood ran cold. He knew those names. He knew what they meant. He pulled one out. Sierra Leone, 1984. His hand was shaking again, but for a different reason. He opened it. The paper was thick, creamy. The ink was the same angry black. The first page was just a date. The second page was a map, drawn in that same angry black ink. The third page was a list of names. And next to the names, there were weights. And next to the weights, there were words. A boy, no older than 12, hands gone, punished for skimming. The stone was 8.4 carats. I bought it for $10 and a bag of rice. God help me. Arthur felt his stomach heave. He grabbed another entry. The village of Kono. They wouldn't move. The company, my company, flooded the valley. They said it was the rainy season. I knew it wasn't. Found a 22-carat yellow in the sluice. It paid for my first plane. I met a man who said the earth bleeds. I think he's right. These are not stones. They are scars. Arthur sat down hard on the cold concrete floor. He was breathing hard. He felt sick. He grabbed another journal. Angola, 1991. They call them conflict diamonds, a polite word. They are war diamonds. They are massacre diamonds. I tell myself I'm just a buyer. I'm a geologist. I'm just a witness. But I'm not. I'm the engine. My demand is the match that lights the fire. Met a man who trades stones for children. He smiled. I bought 3 stones. The children, I did not ask. Arthur slammed the book shut. The dust plumed around him. He scrambled to his feet. He looked at the cabinet, a library of one man's sins. And in the second cabinet, more. And the third, more. He found a journal at the very bottom, a newer one, USA 2015. He flipped it open. The handwriting was more shaky, but still the same. Annalisa came to me. Her school, the foundry. She needs $100,000 for a new roof. I told her no. I told her the world doesn't reward handouts. She looked at me. My God, her eyes, they are her mother's. She said, "It's not a handout, Dad. It's a chance for these kids." I told her to get a real job. She left. She hasn't spoken to me in 6 months. A few pages later, I found the box, the one I buried in the back of the vault, the blood archive, I used to call it. The stones I couldn't bear to sell, the ones that screamed too loud. I held them. They're still warm. I know what to do. I will give her the poison. I can't give her the money. That's clean. It's been washed by lawyers. She needs the thing itself, the origin, the sin. I will let her find the antidote. Only she can wash it, or she'll become me. I can't give her the money, but I can give her the choice. The Choice I Never Made. A final entry, dated just before his death. Put it all in 14B. The keys, the journals, the box. Tom Jr. will clean out the houses, the vaults. Hell, throw this junk away. Hell, put it to auction. It's a message in a bottle, a lottery ticket. Maybe some deserving soul will find it. Maybe God has a sense of irony. My final, ugly test. Maybe. Anna, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I built nothing. Arthur closed the book. He was shaking, but not with fear, with a cold, quiet rage. He wasn't just a winner. He wasn't just a thief. He was an executor. He, Arthur Miller, who built birdhouses and fixed leaky faucets, was now the executor of a dead man's flawed, desperate, final gamble. He packed 3 of the journals, the one from Sierra Leone, the one from Angola, and the last confessional one, into his coat. He left the cabinets. He locked the unit. He drove home, the speed limit seeming impossibly fast. When he got back, the house smelled of bleach. Ellie wasn't asleep. She was sitting at the kitchen table, in her robe. The past due notice was in her hand. The rosewood box was on the table in front of her, gleaming under the single harsh kitchen light. Ellie? She looked up. Her eyes were hard. I was waiting. What did you find? She asked, her voice flat. More? Arthur sat down. He put the 3 journals on the table. They looked obscene next to the salt shaker. He opened the USA 2015 one. He didn't say a word. He just pushed it toward her. Ellie put on her reading glasses. She read the first page he'd marked, and the second, and the third. When she was done, she took off her glasses and very, very gently closed the book. She looked at him. He called them the poison, she said. He did, Arthur said. And he was giving his daughter the choice. He was. Ellie stood up. She went to the sink and ran a glass of water. She drank it down in one go. She turned back to him. "This is hell, Arthur," she said, her voice shaking with a sudden, cold fury. "You brought hell into my kitchen." "It was already here, Elle," he said, tapping the rosewood box. "In this." She took a deep breath. "I want to throw it in the river. We drive to the quarry right now, and we throw the whole box in. We throw these books in. We burn them." "And the girl?" Arthur asked, his voice quiet. "Annalisa? The teacher? The one with the leaky roof? We just let her fail? We let her father win? He wanted this. He wanted someone to fail the test." "It's not our test, Arthur," she cried. "We bought the ticket, Elle," he said, his voice hard. "We opened the box. We're in the game." Ellie looked at the past due notice. She looked at the journals. She looked at the box. "This poison," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. It could buy us a life. The house, my medicine. We could live." "It's not a life, Elle," Arthur said sadly. "It's just more time. And it's his time, bought with that." He gestured to the journals. Ellie was quiet for a long time. The refrigerator hummed. A car passed on the street outside, its bass rattling their thin windows. "Well," she said, her voice small but clear, "I don't like him. I don't like him at all. But he's right." "About what?" "It's a choice." She looked at her husband. "But I can't. I can't choose. Not blind. Not like this." She took a deep, shuddering breath. "You, Arthur Miller," she said, "are going to go to the city tomorrow. You're going to find the most discreet, expensive jeweler you can, and you are going to take one of those stones, the smallest one." Arthur's heart hammered. "Ellie, you read." "I read," she said, cutting him off. "I know exactly what they are. You're going to find out what it's worth. You're not going to sell it. You're not going to give him your name. You're just going to get a number, a real number." "Why?" "Because," she said, her voice gaining strength, "we've lived our whole lives on what-ifs and if-onlys. For once, I want to know exactly what we're dealing with. I want to know the size of the choice. Well, just look at the snake, Art. We won't touch it. Not yet. And then, we're going to call that girl in Detroit." Arthur went to a part of the city he'd only ever driven through. Glass towers, women in fur coats walking tiny dogs, doormen who looked at his '98 Buick like it was a piece of garbage that had washed up on their clean sidewalk. He parked in a garage that cost $40 for 1 hour. He almost turned around. He'd found a name online, R.J. Zaleski, by appointment only, estates and acquisitions. He wore his church suit, the one he wore to funerals. He'd polished his shoes. He had the smallest, dullest-looking stone in his pocket. It felt like a lump of coal. He didn't have an appointment. The receptionist, a woman who looked like she was carved from ice, tried to dismiss him. "I'm afraid Mr. Zaleski is—" "I was sent by Thomas Kincaid," Arthur said. The name felt like a curse on his tongue, and his voice cracked on Kincaid. He'd never told such a big lie. The ice melted. Just a little. One moment. He was led into a room that was softer than his entire house. Thick carpet, leather chairs, silence. Mr. Zaleski was a small, neat man with a jeweler's loop on a chain around his neck. He looked disappointed to see Arthur. "You knew Mr. Kincaid?" Zaleski asked, his hands folded. "He owed me a favor," Arthur lied again. "It was easier this time. He told me if I was ever in a bind to bring this." He put the stone on the black velvet pad. Zaleski looked at it. He did not look impressed. He picked it up with a pair of tweezers, breathed on it, and sighed. Mr. Kincaid had an eclectic sense of humor. He finally put the loop to his eye. And he froze. Arthur watched the man's breathing stop. He watched the color drain from his face. Zaleski put the loop down. He put the diamond down. He stood up, walked to his office door, and locked it. The click of the deadbolt sounded like a gunshot. He turned back to Arthur. His professional mask was gone. He looked hungry. He looked reverent. "Where," Zaleski said, his voice a low hiss, "did you get this?" "Mr. Kincaid gave it to me, years ago," Arthur said, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might break a rib. They said these were all myths," Zaleski whispered, more to himself than to Arthur. "The Kincaid archive. He bragged about it at a dinner in Antwerp, 1992. No one believed him. They called him a liar. And this is—" He put the loop to his eye again, his hand shaking. "This is an 11.2 carat Type 2A, D-color, flawless, raw diamond. Probably, no, it's South African, premier mine. This is an old stock stone, uncut, uncertified, and utterly priceless." "Priceless isn't a number," Arthur said, amazed at the steadiness of his own voice. Zaleski stared at him. To a collector, to the right collector, who understands that this stone can never be formally certified, that it must remain discreet. He licked his lips. $300,000 minimum. Arthur didn't blink. His knees felt weak. 300,000. That was his house, twice. And what if a man had, say, a small bag of them? Mr. Zaleski sat down. He looked faint. "Mister, you did not give me your name." "I did not." "Mr. Anonymous, if a man had a bag of these, he would be one of the wealthiest and most wanted men in the world. These are not jewelry. These are history. They are assets. They are dangerous. The families of the original mines, De Beers, the Oppenheimers, they spend billions to keep stones like this off the market. They control the price. A bag of these, a bag, would disrupt everything. You're a ghost, mister." Anonymous, walking around with the Holy Grail. The real they won't let you keep it. They'll kill you for it. Not for the money, but for the story. You're holding a story that can't be told. "I see," Arthur said. He picked up the stone. Zaleski's hand shot out. "I will give you 100,000 cash right now for that one stone. No questions. No one ever has to know. It's a way out, an ending." Arthur looked at the man. He saw a man just as trapped as Thomas Kincaid had been, trapped by the wanting. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Zaleski. You've been very helpful." Arthur put the stone in his pocket. "You can't walk out of here with that," Zaleski panicked, his voice rising. "You don't know who's watching. People know these stones. They can smell them. You need me. You need a broker, a cutter, a safe." "I'm not the one who's trapped, Mr. Zaleski," Arthur said, surprising himself. "You are. You're just like him." He walked to the door. "I have a safe," he added, thinking of the space under his bed. "It's been good enough for 50 years." He walked out. The deadbolt clicked open. The icy receptionist looked stunned. He walked out of the glass tower, into the bright, cold sunlight. He felt powerful. Not because of the stone in his pocket, but because he had said no. He drove home. He took the freeway, not the side streets. He got home in 40 minutes. Ellie was in the kitchen, a phone book open. She was circling numbers. Heating and air, plumbing, roofing. "Well?" she asked, not looking up. 300,000, Arthur said. "For the one," Arthur continued. "The little one. He said the bag, he said it would disrupt things." Ellie closed the phone book. "Oh my. Well, that is a number." "He said they're dangerous, Elle. He said people look for these stones." "Yes," Ellie said, as if she'd been expecting it. "I'm sure they do." She tapped the phone. "I was just looking up the area code for Detroit." She found the number for the foundry. A machine answered. "You've reached the foundry. We're busy building, welding, and painting. Leave a message." Ellie hung up. She's busy building, just like the note said. She looked at Arthur. "The Buick. Do you think it will make it?" "Make it where?" "To Detroit, Arthur. Where else?" It took them a day to get ready. Arthur went to the bank and took out their last $600. He spent it on 4 new, used tires, an oil change, a new fan belt, and a 5-gallon gas can for the trunk just in case. Ellie packed a cooler with sandwiches, hard-boiled eggs, and 2 thermoses of coffee. They were moving like fugitives, like spies. She packed the rosewood box and the 3 journals into a battered old laundry basket and put it on the floor of the back seat, covered by a faded, plaid blanket. They left before dawn. They didn't tell anyone where they were going. The Buick hummed. It was a 9-hour drive. They spoke very little for the first 3. It was just the sound of the road and the feeling of flight. They were running. Not from Zaleski, not from the past due notices. They were running towards something. Around noon, somewhere in Ohio, Ellie spoke. 300,000, she said to the window. We could just go to Florida, right now. Just drive south. Arthur glanced at her. We could. And what? She said, turning to Em. Sit on a beach, waiting for Mr. Zaleski's friends to knock on the door? No. This thing has a string on it, Art. We've got to find the other end. She was quiet for another hour. I'm frightened of her, Arthur. The daughter. Why? She's Kincaid's blood. What if she's just like him? What if we're just delivering the poison to the monster? She's a teacher, Elle, in Detroit, Arthur said, his voice firm. She's running away from him, not toward him. They hit Detroit in the late afternoon. The city was vast. Arthur's map, which was from 2005, wasn't helping. Their phone was just a phone. It didn't have maps. They had to stop and ask for directions 3 times. Each time, they were met with a kindness and a weariness that felt familiar. The Foundry? Yeah, I know it. Over on the east side, a man at a gas station told them. What you want with that place? It's just a bunch of kids. They found it. The neighborhood wasn't just rough, it was empty. Burned-out houses, lots reclaimed by nature. But in the middle of it all was an island of noise and light. It wasn't a school. It was an old brick, foundry, a warehouse. The windows were mostly boarded up, but the ones that weren't were lit from within. A bright, colorful mural of a phoenix was painted on the side. The sign, which was welded out of rebar, just said, "Build." They parked the Buick. It was the only car on the street that was older than 10 years. A kid on a bicycle, maybe 16, circled them once, his eyes curious. You cops? We're grandparents, Ellie said, her voice small. The kid nodded, as if this were a reasonable answer, and rode off. Well, Arthur said, here we are. Ellie took a deep breath. Okay, let's go meet her. They got out. Arthur grabbed the laundry basket. It felt absurd. He was carrying, by Mr. Zaleski's math, more money than the entire city block was worth. And he was carrying it in a basket from Target. They walked to the door. There was a loud whir sound from inside, and the clang of metal on metal. Arthur raised his hand to knock, but the door was yanked open before he could. A young man, maybe 20, wearing goggles on his head and a leather apron, almost ran into them. Whoa, sorry, can I help you? It was the kid from the bike. We're here to see Annalisa Kincaid Sharma, Ellie said, her voice high. The young man looked them up and down. Yeah, she's in the back, in the studio. Just follow the noise. They stepped inside. The space was vast and cold, but it was alive. In one corner, kids were welding, sparks flying. In another, a girl was spray painting a canvas as big as their car. In the center, a group was gathered around a pottery wheel. It smelled of oil, paint, hot metal, and ozone. It was the smell of creation. Arthur realized with a jolt that it was the exact, perfect opposite of Kincaid's journals, which smelled of dust and destruction. Anna, the young man yelled, people for you. A woman emerged from behind a hanging canvas. She was in her late 40s, wearing paint-smeared overalls, her hair in a messy bun. She had that same tired, bright smile from the website, and she had her father's eyes. Hard, hawk-like, intelligent. Hi, she said, wiping her hands on a rag. Can I help you? Are you lost? No, dear, Ellie said. We're not lost. We're looking for you. Annalisa's smile faltered. Okay, about what? Are you from the city? The inspectors? Because the fire marshal was just here, and I told him. We're not from the city, Arthur said, his voice rough. He was out of his element. We bought your father's storage unit. The light in Annalisa's eyes went out. The smile vanished. The hard, hawk-like look took over. She physically recoiled, crossing her arms over her chest. "I'm not interested. We found some things," Arthur stammered. "Look, Mr. Miller, Arthur Miller, this is my wife, Ellie. Mr. Miller, my father and I, we didn't talk. For the last 10 years of his life, we did not talk. He died, he left everything to my brother, and he left me nothing, which is what I expected. I don't want his things. I don't want his junk. If you found some old pictures, just throw them away, please. I'm very busy." She turned to go. "He left you these," Ellie said, her voice suddenly strong. She stepped forward, past Arthur. She reached into the basket and pulled out the 3 journals. She held them out. Annalisa stopped. She looked at the journals. She recognized the Moleskine notebooks. She recognized the gold-embossed labels. Her face went through 1,000 emotions: anger, grief, rage, and finally, a terrible, profound sadness. "His sermons," she whispered. He used to read from them. At dinner, about his adventures, about the savages he was civilizing. I burned the rest after he died. My brother, Tom Jr., he had a cleansing. He burned all of his personal effects. I stole 3, just to remember how much I hated him." "We read them," Ellie said softly. "We read the last one, the one from 2015. Annalisa's head snapped up. Her eyes narrowed. "What?" "He wrote about you, about the school, about the roof." Annalisa's tough exterior cracked. A tear rolled down her paint-smeared cheek. She wiped it away, angrily. He told me no. He told me to get a real job. He said I was wasting my inheritance." "Yes," Arthur said, stepping forward. He reached into the basket. He pulled out the rosewood box. He said your inheritance was not what you wear." He held the box out to her. Annalisa stared at it. She knew the box. His specimen box. He kept it in his safe. I was never allowed to touch it. "He left it for you, Anna," Ellie said. "He left it all for you. The note, it said, 'For Anna.'" Annalisa was shaking her head. No, I don't want it. That's his. That's the poison." Arthur and Ellie looked at each other. "You read that part," Annalisa said, a bitter, broken laugh escaping her. "Of course. His final cruel joke. To give me the one thing he knew I could never accept. Blood money. He leaves my brother the company, and he leaves me the sin." "He left you a choice," Arthur said. "It's not a choice!" she cried, and now the kids were starting to look. The welding stopped. The whir of the pottery wheel wound down. The whole vast room went silent. "Don't you understand?" she shouted, her voice echoing. "I can't touch that. I can't sell it. It's cursed, and I can't keep it. What am I supposed to do with it? Huh? What? Look at this place. The furnace is broken. We're using space heaters. The city is trying to condemn the building. I have 22 kids who have nowhere else to go, and he sends me a box of that?" She gestured wildly and knocked a piece of pottery off a shelf. It shattered on the floor. The sound was a small, sad echo of her own breaking. She was sobbing now, great, racking sobs. Ellie stepped forward, and before Annalisa could pull away, she put her arms around her. She just held her. An old woman, smelling of bleach and mothballs, holding a stranger, in the middle of a cold warehouse. "I know, dear," Ellie whispered. "I know. We felt it too. Arthur, he took one, to the city. We found out. We know what it's worth." Annalisa pulled back, her eyes wide, smeared with paint and tears. You You appraised it? We had to know the size of the choice, Arthur said, stepping into the circle. And it's big. It's very, very big. He opened the box. He held it up. The diamonds, under the harsh fluorescent lights of the warehouse, looked dull, greasy, like gravel. "They're ours," Arthur said, his voice firm and clear, cutting through the silence. Annalisa and Ellie both looked at him. "What?" Annalisa said. "They're ours. We paid $340 for Unit 14B, legally. As is, where is. It's our property." He pulled himself up to his full stooped height. He, Arthur Miller, was finally acting. "Ma'am, Miss Kincaid, my wife and I, we're simple people. We don't understand sin, but we understand property and taxes." Ellie looked confused, and then a slow, small, brilliant smile. "Yes, Arthur, it is. It's our gravel, and we're worried about the gift tax, dear," she fumbled, playing along. It's astronomical, but a donation to a 501c3. "And," Arthur continued, "we're old. We don't need assets. We don't need to disrupt anything. But we've always wanted to be philanthropists." He smiled. It was a good, warm smile. "We'd like to make a donation." He held the box out to Annalisa. Annalisa stared at the box, at Arthur, at Ellie. Her rage had nowhere to go. She was disarmed. You're giving them to me? To the school?" "We're donating them to the foundry," Ellie clarified, "to what you built. We'd like a receipt for tax purposes." Annalisa laughed. It was a watery, broken, beautiful sound. A gasp. "Who are you?" she whispered. "A receipt for how much?" "For $340, I guess," Arthur said. Annalisa was laughing and crying. You're insane. You're both completely insane." "We're just old," Ellie said, "and we have a long drive, and we don't want to be in trouble." Annalisa finally, slowly reached out and took the rosewood box. Her hands, which were strong and covered in calluses and paint, wrapped around it. She looked at Arthur. You saved me," she whispered. "How's that?" He put the choice on me, the poison, and I would have failed. I don't know what I would have done. I probably would have thrown it in the river and hated him for it forever. But you took the choice. You took the poison, and you turned it into this." "Well," Arthur said, "we had a bit of a head start. We had the journals." He handed her the journals. "These are yours too." Annalisa took them. What do I do? I can't just sell them. Not here, not in Detroit. Zaleski? Was his name Zaleski?" Arthur nodded, stunned. "Yeah, my father. He made Zaleski. Zaleski he'd bury them, he'd cut them and sell them to sheiks and rappers. No, that's not the antidote." She looked at the box, and a new, sharp light came into her eyes, her father's eyes. "And maybe," she said, her voice dropping, "maybe I take them, and I take them back. I take them back to Sierra Leone. I take them back to Botswana. I find the villages. I start a new foundry in Kono. I build a school on top of his grave. I use his sin to fix something." Arthur and Ellie looked at her. She was her father's daughter, all right. That same hawk-like intensity. But her eyes were not hard. They were clear. That, Ellie said, sounds like a wonderful choice. Annalisa, she hugged them, a real bone-crushing hug. Thank you. Thank you thank you. She insisted they stay. She made them coffee. She gave them a tour. They met the kid who'd opened the door. This is Sparky, she said. He's our best welder. He's building a throne out of old car parts. Sparky just blushed and said, "It's for Miss Anna. She's the queen." Annalisa showed them the plans for the new roof. They met the kids. They saw the art. It was beautiful. As they were leaving, Annalisa ran to her studio. Wait! She came back with a small framed watercolor. It was a sunrise over a lake. But the sun wasn't a sun. It was a piece of metal, a bright, glowing, welded thing. It's sunrise over the foundry, she said. My mother, she painted. Before he told her to stop, he said it wasn't productive. It's not very good, but I want you to have it. Ellie took it. She was crying. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. The drive home was quiet, but it was a different quiet. It wasn't the silence of fear. It was the silence of peace. The Buick hummed. The watercolor was on the back seat. Somewhere in Ohio, Arthur reached across the center console and took Ellie's hand. They held on for miles. They got home well after midnight. The house was cold. The past due notice was still on the table. Nothing had changed. And everything had. Arthur hung the watercolor by the front door. The next morning, the phone rang. It was the doctor's office. "Mrs. Miller, this is very unusual. We're calling about your prescription." "Yes?" Ellie said, her heart sinking. "Well, it's been paid. An anonymous donor called in. From Detroit? I don't understand. The Annalisa Kincaid Sharma Foundation? It doesn't exist, but the money does. A lot of it. They paid your outstanding balance, and they've set up an account, a trust, for Art and Ellie's future. For the rest of the year. They said to tell you the roof is fixed." Ellie hung up the phone. She looked at Arthur. He was sitting at the kitchen table, which was still just for Micah. He was drinking coffee from his favorite chipped mug. She walked over to him. She sat down. "Well," she said, "the roof is fixed." Arthur smiled. He reached across the table and took her hand. His gnarled, arthritic fingers laced with hers. "We're going to be okay, aren't we, Art?" she whispered. He looked at her. He looked at the peeling paint on the wall. He looked at the past due notice, which he calmly picked up and tore. Not into 4 squares. He tore it into tiny, tiny shreds. Confetti. He let them fall into his hand. And he looked at the watercolor by the door, the one with the impossible, beautiful sunrise. "We already are, Elle," he said. "We already are." They sat in the quiet, the morning light washing over the peeling paint, 2 people who had found a millionaire's fortune and had been wise enough to give it away, keeping only what mattered. He opened his hand and blew the confetti into the air. They laughed, not a big laugh, but a real one. They were home.